The tension in Judge Judy's courtroom was electric. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat at the defendant's table. Her posture, steady eyes, locked ahead despite the storm building around her. Judge Judy Sheindlin, America's fiercest TV judge, leaned forward from the bench, her trademark stern glare even more intense than usual. Congresswoman Crockett, Judge Judy's voice sliced through the air like a blade. "I've been hearing about your grandstanding in Congress, and honestly, I think someone needs to show you some respect for order." The crowded courtroom held its breath. This wasn't any ordinary case. It was a special episode starring the outspoken young congresswoman, and Judge Judy looked more than ready to rumble. What came next would become the most replayed moment in Judge Judy's 25-year reign, and it pushed Jasmine Crockett further into the spotlight as a rising political firebrand. "Your Honor," Crockett began, her voice cool but carrying a sharpness that made everyone lean in. "With all due respect, I think you might want to double-check your facts before coming for me." The audience gasped. Nobody claps back at Judge Judy, ever. But Jasmine Crockett was about to do just that. And her comeback would leave the legendary judge speechless for the first time in TV history. If you're ready to see how Congresswoman Crockett faced off with America's toughest judge, smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss these jaw-dropping political showdowns. Now, let's find out what happened when two of the most powerful women in America went head-to-head. To really understand why this clash was so explosive, you need to know exactly who these two forces are and how they ended up here. Judge Judy Sheindlin has been the undisputed queen of courtroom TV for more than 2 decades. At 81, she's built a legacy on being tough, no nonsense, and totally unwilling to tolerate what she calls nonsense. With her razor-sharp wit and zero-tolerance style, she's made millions shutting down liars and calling out bad behavior. Judge Judy started from modest roots in Brooklyn, climbed her way through law school, and spent years as a family court judge before becoming a television icon. She's used to being the smartest voice in the room and always having the final say. Her show turned her into one of the highest-paid personalities on TV. She's never faced a challenger she couldn't silence. But here's what made Judge Judy especially dangerous in this moment. She'd been watching Jasmine Crockett's rise in Congress with growing annoyance. As someone who built her name on structure and respect, Judge Judy saw Crockett's fearless grilling of the elite as out-of-line showboating. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, embodies everything that rattles Judge Judy's traditional worldview. At 42, she's a former civil rights lawyer who built her rep by refusing to be silenced, not by Supreme Court justices, not by federal judges, not even by top politicians. She didn't land in Congress because of connections or old money. She got there by hustling harder and thinking sharper than everyone else. Crockett learned early on that respect isn't automatic, it's earned. Her legal roots taught her to always come armed with facts, and as a black woman in politics, she knew she'd have to be twice as sharp to get noticed. Titles, age, reputation, none of that scares her. She's here for truth and accountability. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just TV. Dramawit was a clash of two completely different mindsets, power and respect clashing in real time. Judge Judy stood for the old guard: respect authority first, ask questions later. Crockett stood for the new school: authority has to earn respect through action, not titles. The outcome of this face would send a message about which mindset America was ready to get behind. Would Judge Judy's experience and traditional power win out? Or would Crockett's preparation and bold principles prove that a new wave of leaders was ready to lead? Everyone in the room knew they were about to witness something iconic. Two of the sharpest, toughest women in America were about to square off, and only one would leave with her reputation untouched. The confrontation started almost instantly when Judge Judy brought the court to order for what was supposed to be a special segment covering congressional ethics and public duty. Congresswoman Crockett, Judge Judy began, glancing at her notes with dramatic intent. "I've been following your performance in Congress, and I've got to say I'm not impressed. The crowd shifted in their seats. This was already way more personal than anyone saw coming. You seem to think being loud and confrontational makes you effective. Judy continued, but I see a young woman who doesn't grasp how to show proper respect to her elders and betters. Crockett's face stayed still, but those who knew her noticed the slight tension in her eyes. Judge Judy had just made her first real mistake, calling out Crockett's intelligence and professionalism. Your Honor, Crockett replied smoothly, I'd be happy to walk through my congressional record with why. Think you might be surprised by what I've actually done. But Judge Judy wasn't there for a back and forth. She was there to deliver one of her classic verbal Don't you Your Honor me in that tone, Judy snapped, her voice rising. I've been in law longer than you've been breathing. I've seen countless lawyers who think they're the smartest person around. They all have the same flaw. They're usually wrong. The room's tension spiked. Judge Judy was clearly trying to assert dominance with age and career weight. You want to talk about accomplishments? I've been on national TV for 25 years, making more money than most elected officials could imagine, because I know how to deal with people like you. Crockett leaned in slightly, voice steady but sharper now. Your Honor, I'm not sure what you mean by people like me. Could you explain that? The question landed like a punch. Judge Judy had stepped into a risky zone, and everyone in the courtroom could feel it. Maybe realizing she'd crossed a line, Judy shifted her angle. What I mean is politicians who think they can step into long-standing institutions and change everything without earning their stripes. Been in Congress, what, a couple of years? And you think you can call out Supreme Court justices and top federal judges? This was the opening Crockett had been waiting for. Judge Judy had just shown that she didn't really get what Crockett's role actually involved. Your Honor, Crockett said, her voice now holding the command she'd sharpened over years. In the legal arena, I think there might be a little confusion about how our constitutional system functions. The audience felt the shift. Crockett wasn't backing down, she was setting up her counter. Judge Judy, thinking she still had control, doubled down. Don't lecture me on the Constitution, young lady. I've been interpreting the law longer than you've been alive. Your generation thinks it knows everything, but you don't get what it means to truly respect institutions. She pointed at Crockett directly, her voice taking on that signature tone that made her famous. You want to know what I really think? I think you're a grandstander who uses dramatic language to get noticed. Real lawyers get things done quietly and with class. What Judge Judy didn't realize was that she had walked right into Crockett's perfectly laid setup. By dismissing Crockett's legal background and implying she was unprofessional, Judy had given Crockett the green light to show just how sharp and prepared she actually was. Crockett leaned back slightly, a faint smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. People who'd watched her dismantle opponents in congressional hearings recognized that look instantly. Your Honor, she said, pulling a folder from the table one her legal team had carefully put together since you questioned my legal experience and my grasp of constitutional principles. I think now would be a perfect time to go over a few facts. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow, still clearly confident. What facts could you possibly have that would apply here? Well, Crockett said, opening her folder with slow precision. Let's begin with what you mentioned a moment ago about respecting institutions and handling matters quietly. The room went dead silent. Everyone could sense Crockett was building to something huge. You said you've been interpreting the law for decades. Which is accurate, but I think the audience might be curious about how you've actually handled some of your best-known cases. Judge Judy's confident expression flickered just slightly. She wasn't used to being the one under the microscope. Crockett pulled a stack of papers from her folder. Your Honor, I've taken the liberty of reviewing a few of your most talked about rulings from your time as a family court judge before your TV career. This was unexpected. Nobody had ever brought up Judge Judy's actual judicial record on her own show. What are you doing? Judge Judy asked, but her tone had lost some of its earlier bite. I'm showing the contrast between television drama and real legal analysis, Crockett replied smoothly. Since you brought up my credentials, I figured we could also look at yours. The audience was glued to every word. This had gone way beyond a normal Judge Judy episode. It was turning into a real legal battle between two accomplished lawyers. Crockett held up the first sheet. This is from a 1987 case, where you ruled against a single mum asking for child support. Your reasoning was that she should have made better decisions instead of leaning on the court system. Judge Judy's cheeks began to redden. That case was decided correctly, based on the facts at hand, she replied. Maybe, Crockett continued, but here's what stands out. 3 years later, the appellate court reversed your decision, saying your logic lacked proper consideration of legal standards and relied too much on personal opinion. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Judge Judy was getting fact-checked live, and she definitely hadn't seen it coming. What followed shifted the entire tone of the clash. Judge Judy, clearly shaken from having her record questioned, made a critical mistake. How dare you come into my courtroom and challenge my judicial record, she yelled, rising from her bench. I don't care what some appellate court said years ago. Know how to run a courtroom. But Crockett wasn't done. Your Honor, this actually raises an important issue. This isn't technically your courtroom, is it? The question landed hard, like a punch in slow motion. What did you just say? Judge Judy snapped. Crockett stood tall, all her courtroom training now front and center. I said, this isn't really your courtroom. It's a TV set. You're not a sitting judge anymore. You're a television host who arbitrates disputes for entertainment. The crowd gasps. Someone had finally said it to her face, and she did not like it. The authority you're claiming to have over me as a congresswoman is imaginary. I'm an elected federal official. You're a retired judge working in television. Our roles in the actual legal and political systems are very different. Judge Judy was silent for the first time in her TV career. Someone had broken down her authority, point by point. While staying cool and factual, the stage was now perfectly set for what would go down as the most iconic moment of either of their careers. What came next would be replayed millions of times and studied in law schools as a masterclass in standing up to overreaching authority. Crockett remained standing, her voice calm but filled with the weight of someone who's spent years in constitutional law. Your Honor, since you brought up respect for institutions, let me break down how our constitutional system actually operates. She opened to another section in her folder. As a member of Congress, I took an oath to support and defend the U.S. Constitution. That oath includes oversight of the executive and judicial branches, including questioning Supreme Court justices on their conduct. Judge Judy tried to cut in, but Crockett continued with the precision of a seasoned attorney. You called that grandstanding, but the Constitution literally gives Congress the duty and authority to investigate and oversee other branches. It's called checks and balances, and it's the backbone of our democracy. Crockett pulled out a pocket constitution and held it up. Article 1, Section 1, gives Congress legislative power. Article 1, Section 8, gives Congress the ability to regulate courts, including the Supreme Court. So when I challenge judicial ethics, I'm not being disrespectful, I'm doing exactly what the founders had in mind. The audience was locked in. This had gone from personal drama to a real-time civics lesson, delivered by someone who clearly knew her stuff. Your Honor, you said I don't respect institutions, but respectfully, I think you might not fully understand what my role in those institutions actually is. But Crockett wasn't done. She pulled one final document from her one that would turn the tide completely. You mentioned that real lawyers handle their work quietly and with class. That's a valid opinion, but it's not backed by legal precedent. She held up a Supreme Court decision. In McGrain v. Doherty, 1927, the court ruled that Congress has not just the right but also the responsibility to investigate and expose corruption in government. The court clearly said that Congress's oversight role is vital to informed lawmaking. Judge Judy was staring at Crockett with a blend of surprise and reluctant respect. She had expected to intimidate a young politician, not get schooled in constitutional law by an expert. So when I question Supreme Court justices about hidden gifts and ethical lapses, I'm not grandstanding, Crockett said. I'm carrying out my constitutional responsibility as defined by the Supreme Court itself. Then she shifted from constitutional theory to personal experience, and her voice gained a sharper tone. Your Honor, you questioned my legal background earlier. Let me make something clear for you and the audience. She held up her resume. I graduated from the University of Houston Law Center. I spent over 10 years as a civil rights lawyer, winning cases in federal court that protected people's constitutional freedoms. I was elected to the Texas legislature, where I passed major legislation. Then I was elected to Congress, where I now serve on the House Judiciary Committee. The contrast with Judge Judy's television legacy was getting harder to ignore. My ability to speak on constitutional law isn't based on TV ratings or drama value. It's grounded in education, experience, and the trust of voters who sent me to Congress. What followed next was delivered with pinpoint precision. You said, I don't understand respect for institutions, Your Honor. But what you really seem to mean is that you expect deference to power figures, no matter whether that power is earned or fitting. Crockett's voice stayed composed but assertive. I have deep respect for real institutional authority. I respect federal judges who follow ethical standards. I respect Supreme Court justices who show judicial professionalism. I even respect TV figures who know their lane. The message was crystal clear, and the audience caught it instantly. But respecting institutions doesn't mean blindly obeying people who claim power they don't actually hold. Then Crockett delivered what would become the most quoted line of her tone. You criticize my generation for thinking we know it all, but Your Honor, we don't think we know everything. We believe we know enough to ask the right questions of the right people at the right moment. She motioned to the courtroom around them. You built a career on holding folks accountably, demanding they answer for their actions. So how is what I do in Congress any different? The comparison landed hard. Judge Judy had spent decades grilling people on camera. But when someone turned that same lens on the institutions she revered, she called it disrespect. The difference is that when I ask tough questions, it's Supreme Court justices with lifetime power and influence over millions of Americans. When you ask tough questions, it's people arguing over rent deposits and minor accidents. Crockett sat down, but she wasn't quite done. Your Honor, you mentioned earlier that you've made more money than most politicians could ever imagine. That's probably true. But money isn't how we define success in public service. She leaned in, her tone steady and sincere. I could have stayed in private law and made more. I could have gone into corporate law and made even more. But I chose public service because some things matter more than income. The courtroom was completely still. Even Judge Judy seemed to realize something meaningful was happening. So when you question my qualifications or my approach, Your Honor, I want you to understand something. I'm not here for the money, the fame, or the TV audience. I'm here because the Constitution tells Congress to provide oversight. And I take that seriously. For maybe the first time in her television run, Judge Judy was truly speechless. She sat back in her seat, staring at Crockett with a look that blended surprise, respect, and maybe even admiration. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all of its earlier edge. Congresswoman, that was quite a response. The words were barely above a whisper, but everyone in the courtroom heard it. Judge Judy, the woman who made a career out of always having the final say, had just been outargued by someone half her age. I think, Judge Judy said slowly, I may have misjudged you. Crockett gave a faint smile. Your Honor, that's been happening to me my whole career. I'm used to it. The courtroom burst into applause, the audience, many of whom came expecting to see Jasmine Crockett get the classic Judge Judy treatments, and Ed witnessed something entirely different. They had just seen a constitutional attorney calmly and thoroughly dismantle one of television's toughest personalities, all while staying professional and composed. People were on their feet clapping, others recording the moment on their phones, knowing they'd just seen something historic. This wasn't just good TV, it was a clinic in how to deal with authority figures who pushed their limits. Even Judge Judy's own team looked impressed. They'd worked with her for years and had never seen anyone stand toe-to-toe with her like this. The aftermath of Crockett's expert takedown of Judge Judy's authority was unlike anything TV had seen before. As the show wrapped, the energy in the studio was electric, with Judge Judy clearly rattled by the moment and offering something she almost never gave: genuine respect. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said during the closing credits, "I want to apologize. I came into this thinking I knew who you were and what you stood for. I was mistaken." The apology was unheard of, especially coming from someone who built an entire brand on never backing down, never admitting fault, and always controlling the conversation. But Crockett's performance had been so sharp, so composed, and so well researched that even Judge Judy had to admit she'd been outmatched behind the scenes. Judge Judy's producers were already huddling, wondering how to handle the episode. They had struck television gold, but also realizing their star had just been dramatically upstaged. Within minutes of filming ending, clips from the face-off were already spreading online. The episode wouldn't air for weeks, but audience members weren't waiting. #JasmineSchoolsJudy started trending within the hour, followed closely by #ConstitutionalBurnout. As Twitter lit up with reactions and breakdowns, Jasmine Crockett just gave Judge Judy a masterclass in constitutional law and professional respect. Tweeted legal scholar Lawrence Tribe, "This is required viewing for anyone who wants to understand how government oversight truly works." Legal Twitter was buzzing, especially among lawyers who had spent years watching politicians stumble over constitutional issues. People were thrilled to finally see someone who actually understood what they were saying. One viral tweet read, "Judge Judy, you don't get authority." Jasmine Crockett pulls out the Constitution and says, "Let me break down exactly how authority operates in America." The memes came instantly, one showing Crockett with a pile of legal docs captioned, "When someone tries to school you on law but you actually studied law," and another of Judge Judy's stunned face with the caption, "When the student becomes the teacher." Legal professionals across the country took note of the exchange. The American Bar Association's Twitter shared clips of Crockett's constitutional breakdown with the comment, "This is why law education matters." Law schools began contacting Crockett's office, asking to use the exchange as classroom material. While a Harvard law professor tweeted, "I'm using this in class next week. Perfect case of how to challenge authority respectfully." Federal judges, speaking off the record, praised Crockett's defense of congressional oversight, with one telling The Washington Post she explained the constitutional concepts better than most attorneys in their courtrooms. The clash had immediate political consequences as Crockett's precise takedown of Judge Judy's authority claims echoed far beyond daytime TV. Democratic leaders quickly realized they had a rising star, and within days, Crockett was invited to major Sunday talk shows. As a polarizing figure, but as a legal expert who could explain complicated principles in simple ways. The House Speaker issued a statement saying, "Congresswoman Crockett showed exactly the kind of knowledge and professionalism we need more of in Congress." Her defense of constitutional standards was outstanding. Even some Republicans quietly acknowledged her performance, with one GOP member of the Judiciary Committee telling reporters, "I disagree with her politics, but she clearly understands constitutional law." That was impressive. Beyond politics and legal circles, the showdown represented something bigger in American culture. For years, Judge Judy symbolized unchallenged authority, the nonsense elder who could shut down any argument with confidence and personality. Crockett's response offered a new model: respectful yet informed resistance to authority that crosses its limits. She wasn't rude or combative, just better prepared and more informed. Cultural writers pointed out the generational and racial dynamics at play. As a young black woman had just out-argued one of the country's most iconic authority figures, not with attitude or defiance, but with sharper knowledge and stronger preparation. "This is what it looks like when a new wave of leadership shows up ready," one columnist wrote. Crockett didn't just defend herself, she defended the constitutional values that make accountability real. In the weeks that followed, both women saw their public images shift dramatically. For Crockett, she went from being known mainly as a tough congressional interrogator to being respected as a true constitutional thinker and national voice. Invitations flooded in from colleges, legal associations, and political organizations around the country. Her book deal, already in talks, became a lot more valuable as publishers saw she had the ability to break down legal and political ideas in relatable ways, all while standing her ground under pressure. Most importantly, her colleagues in Congress began treating her with a whole new level of respect, with committee chairs turning to her on constitutional matters and party leadership bringing her into key strategy meetings. For Judge Judy, the fallout was a little more complicated. While some criticized her for being bested, many gave her credit for recognizing Crockett's expertise and responding with humility. The moment actually boosted her image in some circles, showing she was confident enough to admit when she was wrong. Still, the episode exposed the limits of her TV courtroom persona when faced with real expertise. Some legal analysts noted that while her authority worked in small claims court, it didn't hold up as well against someone with serious constitutional chops. The exchange revealed several powerful takeaways that echoed through political and legal culture. Preparation beats intimidation. Crockett didn't win because of attitude. She won because she had the facts and the law behind her. She came prepared and backed up everything with constitutional insight and legal standing. Respect goes both ways with Crockett, proving that you can challenge power respectfully while still making your case crystal clear. She never raised her voice or made it personal, but her arguments were razor sharp. Constitutional knowledge matters, the episode underscored just how few public figures actually grasp constitutional fundamentals, making Crockett's command of the subject stand out as unshakable. The moment also offered a new look at leadership, how the next generation can lead with integrity, knowledge, and zero fear of outdated power dynamics. Arguably, the biggest long-term impact was educational, as the episode became essential viewing in law classes, political science courses, and leadership training programs. High school civics teachers used clips to teach separation of powers and oversight. Law schools used it to show how to argue under pressure. Political science professors used it to illustrate how deep knowledge can be used strategically. The exchange sparked wider conversations about civic education, with many commentators pointing out how Crockett's clarity on constitutional matters exposed just how little most Americans understand their own system of government. Her approach inspired other young leaders to focus more on substance and professionalism. Instead of chasing viral moments or using combative tactics, the episode also shifted how veteran figures engaged with younger voices, making it clear that underestimating them could come at a cost. Political consultants started dissecting the showdown as a blueprint for dealing with authority. Crockett proved that you can be respectful and fierce, professional and commanding, all at once. Marked a change in how political media discussed congressional figures, with outlets giving more attention to real expertise and constitutional insight instead of just focusing on dramatic statements or viral moments. Crockett's performance showed that audiences were eager for solid information, delivered by someone who actually understood what they were saying, proving that brains and preparation could be just as entertaining as chaos and controversy. In the end, the showdown between Judge Judy and Jasmine Crockett set a new tone for public conversation, making it clear that respecting authority and holding it accountable don't have to cancel each other out. Crockett showed that the strongest way to check overreach isn't with disrespect or hostility, but with deeper knowledge and steady professionalism. She flipped what was supposed to be her embarrassment into a teachable moment for the whole country. The episode proved that in America, constitutional knowledge still matters, preparation still holds weight, and truth still carries power, especially when spoken by someone bold enough to defend it. What did you think of Jasmine Crockett's handling of Judge Judy? Did she walk the line between respect and accountability just right? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to like this video and subscribe for more scenes where prep meets power. The next face-off is always around the corner, and you won't want to miss it.